Welcome to the Fantasy Baseball Beat, part of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Chris Torres. I will be your host. We've got a good one for you today. First, we will be joined by Kansas City Royals beat writer Jaylon Thompson, who covers the Royals for the Kansas City Star. We'll be talking with him about who he thinks will be in the starting rotation, Bobby Witt, Jonathan India, the Royals' not so great outfield, and much, much more. Then we're bringing the heat. We have another great guest. The doctor is in the building. We have Dave McDonald here with us today. We've got a lot to talk about with him. We'll be talking about how to assess risk in your fantasy drafts, some players that you should be avoiding due to their risk. We'll also be talking with my co-host, Mike Carter, about bullpens, of course. And lastly, we got to talk about Sean Burke. Half of you listening to this podcast probably don't even know who that is, but find out why you should know about him. All right. And of course, we're going to end with our mental health minute, and we're going to have a little bit of a twist this time. First, let me bring in my co-hosts, Mike and Dave. Fellas, let's get right to it. We're talking Royals today, and there's no bigger name on the Royals than Bobby Witt. According to NFBC draft data, Witt is the second player currently going off the board behind Shohei Ohtani. There does seem to be a debate, however, as to whether Witt or Ohtani is the better pick at the 101. So my question to both of you, is Bobby Witt your 101? Why or why not? I'm going to start with you, Mike.
Remember what I said 2 weeks ago, and I'm sticking by it. No more wishy-washy Mike Carter takes. All in, all out, whatever it might be. I don't trust Shohei Ohtani with the number one pick. I'm taking Bobby Witt anytime I have the number one pick. It's 30 home runs. It's 30 stolen bases. He's got a batting average that's going to help you to hopefully 290 or above. Last year was really high. I think it's a no-brainer for me based on Ohtani's injury history and the fact that I don't think he's going to do anything close to what he did last year.
All right. I love it. No wishy-washy Mike this year. Dave, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I know I said maybe last week that I wouldn't take Ohtani at 101. And part of the reason was his injuries, but another reason why is just how steady Bobby Witt really is. And he's a 5-category stud. And I actually have Aaron Judge second, to be honest. But Witt, he doesn't miss any games. He's, knock on wood, he's been healthy. And at the best position, you want to get some of the best players, and he is the best. And you can be done with shortstop and just build around him. So he's got a bit of everything, and he's my 101.
Let's bring in Jaylon Thompson. As I said, he is the Kansas City Royals beat writer over at the Kansas City Star. We're really happy to have him back. This is his second time on the show, and we loved having him on last time, so definitely wanted to get him back. Jaylon, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing good, guys. How are you guys doing? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're doing well. Just getting ready for the baseball season. I think we're about a month out from pitchers and catchers, and it can't come soon enough. So, starting to get excited here. But let's start by talking about the Royals rotation. And we know who the guys at the top are, right? We've got Cole Reagans as the ace, Seth Lugo. They re-signed Michael Wacha to a pretty good deal, so he's definitely going to be in the rotation. So you've got your top three there. They re-signed Michael Lorenzen, who I assume, given the contract they gave him, that he'll also be in there. So that opens up a battle for the fifth spot between Chris Bubich and Alex Marsh, and maybe even Daniel Lynch, because I've seen something about him potentially being stretched out as a starter. So my first question to you, Jaylon, is who do you think has the upper hand in this battle heading into the spring?
It's going to be a good battle. Before the Royals re-signed Michael Lorenzen, you were looking at them having to fill 2 spots because they traded away Brady Singer to the Cincinnati Reds and got Jonathan India in return. So when you look at how the rotation is going to filter out, you have Seth Lugo, you have Cole Reagans, you have Michael Wacha, but those 2 spots were really going to be something the Royals needed to address. And by getting Michael Lorenzen, like you mentioned, you're going to have a potential to have that 5th spot now be a mix of maybe 4 or 5 guys. You mentioned Alex Marsh, you mentioned Chris Bubic. They really like Chris Bubic and what he did last year coming down the stretch. He was in the bullpen, he came back from Tommy John surgery, and he looked like the guy that the Royals always envisioned he could be before he went down pre-injury in 2023. You just look at his development and what he can bring to the table as a lefty, and he has a really nice pitching mix that can get batters off balance. And if you look at his numbers, I believe he had a 2.67 ERA in 30 innings, and that's just in relief. So the Royals can extrapolate that out, and he could be a prime candidate for that 5th spot if that's who they want to go to. But it's going to be a competition. Alec Marsh also came on strong, and he actually won the 5th starter job out of spring training last year. And he had some ups and downs during his second year, but he showed that if his fastball can play up, he can really balance off that. He worked on the sweeper and a couple of other pitches that he has in his repertoire. So those 2 are probably going to be the 2 names to watch in spring training, but you can never rule out Daniel Lynch IV. He showed promise as a long relief option last year when he was in the bullpen. He can go those 2+ innings. It's kind of funny. Like, he can be someone that is kind of like the inverse of what Chris Stratton can do when Chris Stratton is healthy, give you that multiple inning guy. So I envision that's probably what his role will possibly be on the team this year when it's all said and done. And also Kyle Wright is coming back from a right shoulder injury, and you have Noah Cameron as well. That's an intriguing rookie that potentially could make the squad if he doesn't start the year in AAA. So you have all these different options. You talk to Royals manager Matt Quatrell. He said that pitching depth is important because last year, let's just be honest, the Royals were remarkably healthy with starting pitchers. That's not always going to be the case. You need about 7, 8, 9 guys, and that's what they have right now.
Yeah, that is certainly a deep rotation. And I know Chris Bubic is kind of a fantasy darling. He was a couple years ago before he had surgery. I remember the week where everybody wanted to bid on Chris Bubic. They saw a change, and he was really, they thought, coming into his own. And then he was gone for about 1.5 years, and now he's back, and his ADP over the past few weeks is 364. Marsh is at 499, and looks like Noah Cameron, Daniel Lynch are going past pick 600. So the fantasy community has made their bet as to who they think is going to win that job. What about you, Jaylon? If you had to put money on it, I don't know if you're a gambling man, but if I gave you some money, who would be your pick to win that battle?
I would probably go Chris Bubic only because of the experience that he really brings to the table. He's done it before. He was already penciled into the role before, like we said, the injury with the Tommy John. And I just feel like, honestly, if you're playing fantasy baseball and you're looking at who should I get on the Royal staff for that 5th spot, I think it's one of those things where you just try to pick up maybe both. You pick up Chris Bubic and you pick up Alec Marsh, and you see who's going to be the guy, because it's not guaranteed that Bubic makes all 25 starts, 30 starts as a 5th starter. They might give him 10. They might give Marsh 5 to 7. They might give Kyle Wright a couple. 5th starters are always leery depending on what the team needs. So I think it'll be more of a committee type thing. But in the beginning, I think if I had to put my thoughts on it, it'll be Chris Bubic. I think he's the front runner.
Well, Jaylon, let me tell you, if you're going to be betting with Chris's money, it's going to be about 62 cents. So don't get your hopes up on retirement, my friend. Jaylon, you talk about the depth of the rotation, and another spot where they have depth and we're not sure how good that depth is in the outfield. And they basically have 5 guys kind of shaking off the 3 spots with Renfroe, Melendez, who is Dave's favorite player, I believe, Isbel, Blanco, and Velasquez. How do you see that shaking out to start the season?
As currently constructed right now, I would say that the Royals are going to need more production out of every single one of those guys you just mentioned. They have mentioned that they would like to add another bat to the lineup, but the reality is you're getting late into the offseason. Spring training is about to come around. Maybe that guy is not available yet, but he could be available in March, or he could be right before the season begins, depending on how teams structure their roster, decisions that other teams might make. Maybe a guy is there that you might can go pick up late in the offseason or in spring training. But as we look at the roster right now, Royals general manager JJ Picollo, he made it clear that he needs the younger guys to continue to mature as hitters. You know, he said it takes 4 or 5 years for a guy to really be the person that he can be at the plate. I mean, the Royals have a luxury in having Bobby Witt Jr. be all world at such a young age. But look how long it took a guy like Salvador Perez to get to where he's at. You look at Vinny Pasquantino, he's just started tapping into what he could be, and injuries kind of slowed him down a little bit throughout his career. But if he can get a full season together, he might be an all-star this year. So when you look at what the Royals have in that outfield, I think they really need Hunter Renfroe to bounce back and be the guy that he is on the back of his baseball card, someone that can hit those home runs. I mean, he averaged 20 home runs pretty much his entire career before last year where he hit 15. So he was a little bit off that pace, and he'll probably be the first one to tell you that he didn't have the best season that he could have had. But if he can come back and he hit those home runs that he's used to, he gives you 20, 25 home runs, I think you have your power that you want from that right field spot. He's always going to give you good defense with a strong arm that he has out there. Teams do not want to run on him. I've seen him throw out so many different guys trying to circle the base paths. MJ Melendez is the guy I believe that you really need to circle and you want to see the improvement. We've been saying for years that he hit those 40 home runs in the minor leagues that one year. I believe that was like 2021 or one of those years. He hit the 40 home runs. They need to see that at the major league level. Maybe not 40 home runs production-wise, but 20 home runs, 25 maybe, and continue to grow out there as an outfielder, be the potential hitter that they need, that maybe that 5th or 6th spot in the lineup. It just depends on, do they bring in someone to platoon with him maybe, or someone that can fit into his role and what that may be. But for right now, he needs to be counted on to be the hitter that he needs to be. And when I spoke to him in the clubhouse after the season, he was saying, yeah, I have to be better next year. I have to for this team to go to where they want to be. And the last guy you mentioned, Kyle Isbell, he's going to be there in center field. They love his defense. It's kind of like Kyle Isbell and Kauffman Stadium go together like hand in hand, like a glove to a hand. He catches everything out there in center field, so he's going to be there for his defensiveness. And the other two, Duran Blanco and Nelson Velasquez, I'm interested in Velasquez because he just went off in I believe it was the international series he was playing in a couple of days ago. He home run binge, and we've seen that out of him. So can he carry that over into 2025? If he can display that consistently, there's your power right there. That's already on your books.
Ask you a follow-up on Blanco. Blanco is a guy that's very interesting to fantasy players because of the stolen base ability. Last year in September, he only got one start for the Royals. Do you see him being able to carve out a larger role? Because Chris would really like to draft him in his next TC.
I think Duran Blanco, from what I've seen since I've been covering the team, he's the guy that's the late inning role. He's going to come in. He's going to steal you some bases. And we all marveled at his 3 home run game in Cincinnati last year, where it was like, oh my goodness, Duran Blanco hit 3 home runs in the game, 7 RBIs. It was shocking. But his role is to be that late inning guy, that 4th, 5th outfielder, steal bases. And when you need it, you know that when Blanco's in the game, he has one job, and that's to steal a base. And just like the Royals have kind of been doing before in the past in their club history, Gerard Dyson's another guy, Terrence Gore, another guy. He's kind of fits that role for the team.
You know, Michael Garcia seemed to fall out of playing time at the end of last season, but he really didn't have the kind of breakout that we all thought that he might. What are your expectations in regards to his playing time and any performance this coming season?
Yeah, I think Michael Garcia, his need, he just has to be more consistent. You've seen it last year when he came into the season. He was in winter ball. He was hitting the ball all over the field. I mean, he had a strong stretch playing all last offseason. Then he comes in, begins the year, hits 2 home runs in the opening series against the Minnesota Twins, and we're like, okay, this is what the Royals envisioned when they had him play third base. And then you kind of saw the bat would go away. He went into some cold slumps. He was up and down, but his defense was his calling card. And I think for the Royals this year, if they don't necessarily add another hitter, whether it's a third baseman or an outfielder, I think he'll be spending most of that time at third base, and he'll kind of potentially shift over a little bit, fill a need or so if they need him around the infield to give some guys some days off, because the Royals value versatility and they're going to play pretty much everyone on the lineup or they have to roster. But he has to play better at third base, and that defense has to be there I expect it will be. But the offense is something that he has to bring it, and it has to be more consistent, and he has to kind of show up in those moments where the Royals need him. Because if he can do that, then it's always good to have someone that can hit 7-8 in your lineup that can consistently get on base, and he has the speed aspect. You guys know the stolen bases were there for him too. He's never really going to be a home run guy, but if he can get you around 175 hits, 40 stolen bases, 35, I think that's a good place for him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If Garcia did struggle and if he did fall out of playing time, who do you think would be the biggest beneficiary of that?
So that's a good question. Looking at what the Royals have right now at third base, when he did struggle last year, they went out and they traded for Paul DeJong at the deadline, and he was someone that got some starts at third base. They had Adam Frazier; he got some starts over there. So they kind of just mixed and matched. But looking at the roster right now, I think someone that if he can make the team, Kevon Biggio might be a person that you could potentially slide over there in that kind of Adam Frazier role because he played all over the field. I think that when you also look at kind of the Royals on their 40-man, they have Nick Lofton that is still available. If he can showcase improvements from his time in AAA last year when he got sent down, he could be someone that could fill in at that third base spot. But honestly, it's going to have to be Michael. He has to be the guy that can play that third base position. I don't know how much they want to put Jonathan India over there at third base. I know that he has the capacity to probably play the position, but he's been known as a second baseman his entire career. So that's something that they have to really consider about what do we do if Michael Garcia is he the guy at third base? Is he not the guy? And I think that's the key thing that the Royals will use spring training to see what they can do at that spot.
Right. Yeah, Garcia to me, kind of a risky pick where he's going, given there does seem to be a little bit of uncertainty. That performance at the end of last season, losing PT, puts a little doubt in my mind in terms of, thinking of him as like a safe bet around pick 200. But I know you mentioned Jonathan India. We're going to ask a little bit more about that. But first, we're going to take a quick commercial break. All right, we are back with Jaylon Thompson of the Kansas City Star. We're talking all things Kansas City Royals, and I did want to circle back to Jonathan India. You mentioned that the Royals went out and traded Brady Singer for him. So do you see him, Jaylon, as just slotting in as the everyday designated hitter most days and going right to the top of the lineup and hitting leadoff? And my other question in regards to India is there any word on his progression from the offseason ankle surgery that he had back in October?
For sure. We have not spoken to Jonathan India as a collective media group yet, but I believe we're going to get the chance to do so coming up soon. And that's going to be something we're going to ask. When he had the offseason ankle surgery, it was considered minor. So by all expectations, I believe that he'll be ready to go for spring training. I think that's going to be something that he'll be out there. He'll be with everyone. From what all reports that I've read from the great folks over in Cincinnati, they were saying that it was just considered minor, and just give him clean up some things, get him ready to go for where he needs to be for spring training and normal buildup. So I think he'll be fine. Now, as far as what he is going to do for the Royals, you have to look at the positions that they have. For example, they have Michael Massey, right? Second baseman. They love what he can do. He had a great year last year. He continued to grow. India also plays second base. There have been talks of could they both consider playing left field. The Royals really haven't figured out exactly what they're going to do as far as on the field defensively, but they do know they want both of those guys in the lineup. So like you said, that brings the DH into question, and they can do that because, as you guys know, Salvador Perez, when he's catching and Vinny Pasquantino's at first base, the DH is open. If Salvador needs to DH, you can play Freddie at catcher, and then you figure it out. But both of those guys are going to play a whole bunch for the Royals. They've already made that clear. They like Jonathan India. They brought him here for a reason, to be that leadoff guy, because Bobby Witt Jr., if he has someone that's hitting in front of him that can get on base, you increase your chances greatly of starting off 1-0 before the pitcher goes on the mound if you're on the road, or to give your pitcher a lead at home. And that's valuable for the Royals, because if you look at a lot of games that they won last year, it was 3-2, 2-1, Seth Lugo, Cole Reagans doing what they do best. They get you a win. That's kind of the formula that the Royals want to do. They love speed, they love defense, they love pitching. And so getting Jonathan India, he can really impact the game as a leadoff hitter. And he also, they believe, can fit well as far as hitting doubles, because Kauffman Stadium is such a big place that he hits one in the power alleys out there. He can get a double easily, and he's done that a great bit in his career. And that's just playing in Cincinnati, which is a hitter-friendly park himself over there. So I think that having India get on base in front of Bobby Witt Jr. is great, because it flips the lineup over and it continues to drive in and score more runs. So that's what the Royals are really banking on with him. It's just a matter of, does he start the year, like you said, at DH and allow Michael Massey, who's a better defender, to be at second base? I'm probably sure that's probably what's going to be early on, but they'll mix and match, but they'll make sure to get both of those guys on the field a lot.
Yeah, for sure. They're probably going to have to try to keep India's feet healthy by DHing him a lot, I would imagine. Jaylon, question for you about the minor league roster. Is there a guy in the minor leagues right now that you think could impact this roster sometime during the 2025 season?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it is probably going to be a pitcher of certain extents. I think that Noah Cameron will be a guy that could be that impact guy. I know you mentioned him earlier. As far as positionally, the Royals, they could look at bringing up a guy like I mentioned. I like Tyler Tolbert. That's the guy that I think someone to watch. He can also play that speed role that, like Deron Blanco has. He's another infielder, another quality infielder. And I kind of look at it kind of with him being around when the rest of the guys that are in the big leagues were in the minor leagues. He hasn't really got his chance yet. And he made his way to AAA last year, and he worked his way up. I think he could be a guy that might get a shot if they need him. John Rave, an outfielder that continues to produce for the AAA Omaha Storm Chasers. He hit 20 home runs last year. He could be someone that might get his opportunity. I think the Royals are going to kind of parlay it, kind of like what they did last year when they had Tyler Gentry come up for a little bit just to give him his MLB experience and what it means to be on a team. They still have opportunities to help develop some guys that are competing for an AL Central divisional crown, but I don't think it'll be someone as big as, say, maybe Jack Caglione yet. I think they still need him to be developed down there.
That was my question. Mr. Jack Tani himself, as they call him, right? Jack Caglione. Is there any percentage chance you think that he makes it to the roster this year?
I wouldn't put it at totally 0% because you just never know with baseball. But I think it's extremely unlikely that we'll see him this year because, let's be honest, he has to go through a full year of professional baseball, and he hasn't done that yet. He just got drafted last year. but the way he's been hitting the ball, you guys have seen it. I mean, it's impressive. And if he is going to focus on just hitting to kind of begin his career to get through the minors as quickly as he can, then I think that you might see him start making waves this year, and he might be knocking on the door. Looking ahead to maybe spring training 2026, then that's probably where I would put him at. But I don't see him coming up this year. One, because the Royals really don't need to break that emergency glass, unless they just really need him, because he's just a first baseman. And he might have to work, and maybe he'll learn an outfield spot this year. That's when they want to try him out in the minor leagues to get him adjusted to it. But with Vinny Pasquantino still holding down first base, there's no need to rush him at
all. I want to know, what's it like covering a superstar like Bobby Witt? Do you have any interesting stories you might want to share?
Yeah. Covering Bobby Witt Jr., it's a great experience because he's so filled with the love of the game of baseball. Every day you see it. You see him always playing as hard as he can. He gets the homers. He gets the stolen bases. This year when he hit the 30-30 mark, we were like, how's it feel to hit 30-30 again, be the first MLB shortstop to do it in consecutive years? And he was like, it's cool, but we lost the game. That's where his mind is. He's like, you just did something that no one's ever done in Major League Baseball, and you're focused on the keys to winning and what it means to get your team back on the winning trail. So I just tell you where his mind is at.
Yeah.
He's not all for the stats. He's all about his teammates. And you can ask anyone in that clubhouse. Bobby will do whatever it needs to be done to help his teammates be successful. So he's very likable. In a quick story, just from my perspective, I was at the All-Star game, when he had the home run derby, finished in second place. I just go chat with the family after the game, after the All-Star game's over, for the story I was writing. And they told stories of just how Bobby is just a big kid at heart. Like, he loves just his family, and he loves to be around them. And his heart is just so filled with joy. And I think that's what really comes across. It's pure. You see it from what you see on the field is exactly who you see off the field. Bobby Witt Jr. is just pure human being all around. And I think that's the reason why people gravitate towards him. And I think that's the reason why he's probably going to be one of the best players in Major League Baseball for years to come.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Nice.
Love hearing stories like that and hearing that, what you're seeing is actually what's going on behind the scenes. So Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. All right, we're going to get you out of here in a few minutes, Jaylon, but just had two kind of quick hitter questions for you.
Yeah.
So the bullpen, we didn't touch on that yet, and as fantasy managers, we're always concerned about that and who's getting saves. We kind of assume that it's Lucas Erceg. So let me ask you: is it 100% in your mind that he is the closer to start the season? And if it is Hunter Harvey the next man up if anything were to happen to Erceg?
Yeah, I would say that's probably the way the Royals are going to lean. Lucas Erceg, he established himself as the closer last year. They really loved him in that spot. So I think going into 2025, he will be the closer. And I think that Hunter Harvey, depending on how he's recovered from his back injury last year that limited him, he would be a setup guy alongside John Schreiber in the bullpen. So that's a nice bridge to get to Erceg. And looking at, I guess, the rest of the bullpen, you got so many different guys that perform well down that stretch, and the Royals just want to make sure that they can have that moving forward. I wouldn't roll out if they go and get someone potentially to add to the mix, like they did last year by getting Schreiber in spring training. But for right now, you have Sam Long, you have Angel Zerpa, you have Schreiber, you have Hunter Harvey. You have a nice mix to get to Erceg. So, like I said, you can never have too much depth, though. So they'll go and they'll continue to look at it. One move that was kind of under the radar, but I thought was pretty smart, was they went and they re-signed Taylor Clark again. He had some good spurts when he was with the team in 2023. Last year he spent the year with the Brewers, but he knows the organization, and like I said, it's low risk, high reward, pretty much. maybe they can use one of these minor league guys to be like Sam Long, who wasn't a non-roster invitee, but he made his spot on the team. So there's different ways you can do it. I think, but like I said, Lucas Erceg is probably the guy in that bullpen, that closer.
Gotcha. Okay. Last one here. Give us the boldest, hottest take that you have for a prediction for a Royals player this coming season.
For a Royals player this coming season. That's a good one. Wow. I got one. Vinny Pasquantino will lead the American League in RBIs this year.
There it is, baby. I got a lot of Vinny P already. Over under, because right now his projection is 26 home runs. Would you take the over or under on that?
26 home runs for Vinny?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I'm going to go over, but I'll say he'll hit 27 because he hit 19, I believe, last year before he got hurt. So another month, I would say he probably hit 27. So I'm going to go 27 for Vinny this year. So over.
Guys, the reason that I bring guests on here is just to confirm my biases and to make me feel better about the players that I've invested in. So
yeah, I was gonna say
absolutely accomplished that for me today. Thank you so much,
Jaylon. Chris will sleep well with his mouth taped shut tonight.
I sure will.
Yeah.
But Jaylon, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Please tell our listeners where they can find your work and where they could find you on social media.
For sure. It's Jaylon Thompson at Jaylon Thompson on Twitter or X or whatever they call it now. And then Kansas City Star is where you can find all my work, though, all the stories that I'm writing and everything like that. Just type in my name in the little search bar and they'll all pop up. So hopefully I'll have some more good stories for you guys, and I hope I can come back on again.
Awesome. We'd love to have you. All right. Thank you again. We're going to say goodbye to Jaylon, and we are going to take a quick commercial break and come back with Dave McDonald. Welcome back. You're listening to the Fantasy Baseball Beat. We hope you're enjoying the show so far. You can follow the show on X at Fantasy B Beat, where we post beat writer articles, give you updates on the show when we're going to be putting out new episodes. And I know I keep saying this, and I promise I will moving forward. We will be posting clips from the show, video clips, so you can see the faces of this beautiful motley crew that we've assembled here at the Fantasy Baseball Beat. Also, please leave us a rating and a review if you are so kind. Go to wherever you get your podcasts. And if you do leave us a rating and review, we are doing a giveaway. You will be automatically be eligible to win a free month of Pitcher List Plus, which has a lot of great features, gives you access to the Pitcher List Discord. There's a daily Q&A with Pitcher List staff, an ad-free website, other perks as well. And I think it's a great tool to help you prepare for your upcoming drafts. Doesn't even have to be a positive review. Any feedback would be appreciated. Just DM us a screenshot at our account on X, and you will be entered to win. I think we'll pick somebody in February. But what you're really waiting for, we've got him, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Dave McDonald is with us. We're so happy that he's here with us today. First time on the show. Dave is everywhere. He's a podcast host at Rotosaurus. He's a co-host at Friends with Fantasy Benefits. He's on X at RunDMCD. Make sure you put the D at the end, or else you're going to be following Run DMC, the band. But Dave, we're so happy that you're here. We're going to be talking a lot about kind of your wheelhouse, which is discussing injury risk and how to assess that in our drafts. So Dave, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. You guys are three of my, and I mean this genuinely, three of my favorite people in the industry. Just got to meet you at First Pitch Arizona, Torres. Met Mike there a couple of years ago. And you guys are just all awesome people. Dave, we talk a lot on Twitter. Obviously, injuries being your thing, I've always been a big fan of yours. So super happy to be here with you guys, and yeah, really excited to talk about some risk today.
All right, awesome. Yeah, and that was really the first thing I found you on Twitter probably at this point, probably like 4 years ago.
Sounds about right.
And I remember like you were posting stuff about assessing risk and assessing injury risk. And I remember just gravitating towards that. And instantly I was like, I want to follow this guy because he thinks about the game in a really smart way. And I loved also the way you thought about range of outcomes. You know, I felt like there wasn't a lot of that type of content out there in the fantasy baseball space. And I thought you did a really good job of kind of introducing that idea of really looking at a player's range of outcomes and considering, you know, all the risk that may be associated with them, you know, and deciding whether they were worth their ADP. So, and yeah, it was awesome meeting you and getting to hang out in Arizona. So, would love to start kind of at that point though, in terms of your process and how you approach risk in fantasy baseball drafts. And I'm just going to give you the floor and let you kind of go off on this.
Yeah, and sorry, this is going to be a little long-winded, but I promise there will probably be some.
No, Dave, not you. Dave, come on.
Hopefully there will be some good stuff in here though, in all my ramblings. And yeah, Torres, when you were talking about, you know, talking about new things and everything, like I see a lot of the same things out there, and it's great. There's so many people who are awesome at player analysis and all that stuff, and now it's kind of ubiquitous, right? Like it's even on Fangraphs now. You don't even have to go searching through the Statcast, you know, search thing that I never got the hang of, to be honest with you. So I always felt like I was kind of behind on the player analysis side. So, you know, me and my friends who I kind of taught and brought into the fantasy baseball scene, we kind of relied on other things. We relied on injury risk analysis, you know, all types of risk, honestly. You know, there's not just injury risk, there's playing time risk, job security, skills risk. But, you know, those were the things that helped us win, was not just assessing risks. Because back when I started, there was no Statcast. There was no advanced stats. You know, you looked at a guy's average and you're like, all right, he had 280 last year, 265 the year before. You'll probably hit somewhere in there this year too. You know, there's no BABIP, like none of that stuff. Like that's how old I am. That's how long I've been doing this for. So a lot of stuff just comes from experience and kind of figuring stuff out along the way. I'm not some brilliant genius. I'm just a guy who learns things when, you know, you touch the stove and you're like, okay, that's hot. I got burned by all kinds of risks when I was starting out. You know, by not looking into risks, I just drafted guys. You know, you didn't know. Nobody followed their, you know, who had this injury when and what does that mean? And so now we've got all this data out here and it's like, well, how do we use it? So, you know, I'm looking at when I'm drafting a team, how am I putting this team together? Which risks am I taking on and at what point in the draft? So there's different types of risks at different positions. So like with closers, I just talked about this on Twitter, job security is paramount. You know, all risks associated with closers are kind of magnified, because saves are a finite resource. It's not, unless you're playing in like a really shallow league where you can just drop a closer and then pick another one up. That doesn't happen in a lot of leagues. Like, you know, NFBC main event, 15-team leagues, there's no closers on the waiver wire. There's not even partial closers on the waiver wire. If a guy's getting, you know, a save every 3 weeks, he's not on the waiver wire pretty much. So, you know, things like that is, you don't want to take risks at positions where you can't afford to. Like if you miss on this, then you're in trouble. You know, and we'll talk about Hoffman later, but and why that could be problematic. But in my first 3 picks of a draft, I take as little risk as possible. I don't want anyone I have to have any question about regarding their health, playing time, skills, anything. If there's something that I deem even a somewhat minimal risk, I really don't want to be doing that in my first 3 picks. The 4th round is kind of the first time I might take an educated gamble if it's someone I think has a reasonable floor with the ceiling of a first rounder. The teams that win, you know, I think everybody has this idea that like in the NFBC main event, because there's all these teams, you have to take some big risks. You have to go YOLO, you know, and That's not really how it is. The teams that win, they win by not missing. And, if you hit on your first 10 picks, pretty much doesn't matter what you do in the next 20 rounds. You're going to be in contention, unless you're trying to lose with the next 20 picks. But like those 10 picks, those first 10 picks, that's like the foundation of your team. You want your foundation to be solid. There's plenty of time to take risks later in the draft. You don't want to do too much in the first 10 rounds. I'm not saying take boring players, but take guys that you feel are solid, that you are confident in. I never draft pitchers who are injured coming into a year. That's something that I've learned over time. Even when they say, "Oh, he'll be back by early May," maybe late May at the latest. I mean, when did Cody Senga finally return? Like late July, and then he returned for one start and then went right back on the IL for the rest of the year. So, and that's just one guy. This has happened tons of times, and that's really all this is learning from your mistakes, right? So like we've all done it. We've all drafted that guy and been like, okay, I'm just going to stash him for a couple of weeks. He'll be back, and he'll be. I think there's a couple of issues. First of all, with pitchers, number one, we're not taking into consideration the time that they have to ramp up. We're not going to want to start them their first start back, maybe not even their second start back, because if they first start they come back, they get pummeled. We're not going to feel confident putting them in the next start after that, are we? With pitchers, there's just all these complications. There's almost always setbacks, and I think we also have to stop thinking of, Jacob deGrom is not Jacob deGrom when he's injured, right? Like I think people put too much name value on guys, and you need to think about them when they're hurt. That's not that guy. It's a different guy. It's a lesser version of that guy. And I think people just kind of in their head are like, well, he's back in May. He's going to be Jacob deGrom again, and we're going to be great. It just doesn't work out that way in reality. Never draft pitchers already injured coming into the season. I also stay away from guys whose ADPs are inflated coming off of a career year, and that career year happened because they are coming off of a season where they finally stayed healthy. We saw Jorge Soler in 2020. He was coming off of a 48 homer season, and everybody pumped him way, way up. I think he was going like fourth round, maybe something like that, maybe even third. It was really high. And, then he had a letdown and he got hurt again. It's like the times you want to take these guys is when they're at a low point in their value, not when they're at a high point in their value. And I think Jazz Chisholm is kind of along that lines this year. It's like a guy who always gets hurt, but then finally was able to stay healthy. Now you're going to have to take him at a high watermark of his ADP and then hoping that he stays healthy. And those aren't the kinds of risks that I like to take. I don't think it makes much sense. Some tips are, I don't stack a bunch of risks of any type together, but it's fine to take a few in your first 20 picks, but most of them should be saved for the last 10 rounds where you can just go wild, because the hit rate, I'm talking like 15 team leagues here where, the last rounds 20 through 30, the hit rate on those is so low. You can just take whatever risks you want pretty much, because most of those guys, you want to have a viable lineup, right? Like you don't want to have potentially holes in your lineup, but outside of that, take some shots there, because those are the places where you can really, if you hit on those lotto picks, that can be a huge difference maker. But the other thing is you don't want to stack the same types of risks together, meaning like I don't want a bunch of injury prone guys together. I don't want a bunch of guys who have playing time concerns on the same team. You want to take like one from one bucket, maybe one from another, maybe one from another. You don't want to combine those risks and kind of magnify that risk by doing that, where you're taking these guys who have the same types of risks, and then you're potentially like, you can replace a key player or two at different points in the season. That's doable, but replacing a bunch of key players in a short amount of time is untenable. Yeah. Like you're not going to be able to replace several guys within the span of a week or two. Very rarely. The other thing is, if you're taking a risky player at a position, let's say you're taking a risky first baseman, make your corner infielder also a first baseman and make it a good, like, move that guy up. Sometimes people wait to take their corner middle. If you take a risky guy, make sure you back him up with someone solid. It doesn't have to be like a top 5 round pick, but like, let's say you take a risky guy round, 4 or 5, something like that. Take that corner infielder, round 8, 9, 10, somewhere where you see a solid guy that you can at least rely on, where if your starter goes down, you've got this corner infielder that you can then slide into your starting first baseman. Also, make sure you draft a solid third baseman, because you don't want to try to replace two guys in a limited window of position. Like, you don't want to have to pick up a first baseman and a third baseman or two first basemen. It's untenable. It's not something that you're going to be able to do and then still keep your team in contention, because that first baseman flops. You can't really rely on a shitty catching or corner infielder to step in. Now you've kind of put yourself in this box where, you're always looking for that, and until you get that, you're losing points to everybody around you. Again, this matters more and more the deeper the league is. In an NFBC 15-team league, it's incredibly difficult to replace these key players. You can take more risks in like a 12-team short roster, like a Yahoo league that I play in, where your guys, there's 275 players drafted in those leagues, compared to a 15-team NFBC league, there's 450 players drafted. So you're looking at guys like Nico Horner and Clark Schmidt might be available in Yahoo, compared to like Casey Mize and Lamont Wade in a 15-team NFBC league. So your replacement value is just so much lower. So you want to take less risk in those deeper leagues. I would have used Byron Buxton as my example, but he'll definitely be stashed on someone's IL slot in a Yahoo league, so he won't be available. So obviously injuries can happen to anyone at any time. The key is not to make them any worse by compounding those risks. Basically, risk management is a strategic piece of the puzzle to winning a league that you put in place to keep your team in contention if the worst case scenarios happen. And, as someone who I'm putting $10,000 on the line with all my fantasy leagues, I'm someone who I'm looking at every league as I can't afford to lose this league. There's some people who are rich. We've got some friends in this, category, like, Zach and Vlad, who can throw out, 10 entries Zach will throw out, 200 entries for a contest. They can afford to do that. So they can afford to take more risks, because they're only looking to hit on a couple. And then if they hit big, okay, cool. I don't have that luxury, and I don't know if you guys do, but I can't afford to be throwing away, $2,000 on this league, $3,000 on that league. So
we already established at the beginning of the show that I do not fit that description. So that has been established. Yes.
Yeah. I don't think many of us do fit that description. So, it's great if you do. And so you can change your risk profile then based on if you have that disposable income, but that's not how I approach it. And I'm assuming probably 80% to 90% of people are looking at each high stakes league as, this is important. I don't want to mess up. So that's why we use this risk management to do it that way. And one of the biggest misconceptions that I see in this industry is, well, all pitchers have risk, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm just going to draft skills and ignore the injury risk. That's like saying anyone can die at any time, so I'm going to draft the 85-year-old smoker over the 25-year-old physical trainer. Sure, either could die tomorrow. That's possible. But who's your money on? I mean, that's the thing. You've got this money on the line. You're not trying to lose that money. Make smart decisions. It's not about, this YOLO approach of, well, I don't know, so I'm just going to go wild and draft skills, and, that's fine, but you need to balance everything. So that's how I approach risk and risk management.
All right, folks. Well, that's the show. Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, that was great, man. Thank you for going through that. I hope those who are listening were taking notes. Really valuable stuff in there. I mean, we could have a whole show just discussing this. We could talk for hours about these principles. But we're gonna have an exercise here where we kind of apply some of these strategies and principles to a few players for this season. Before we do that, though, I want to throw out an idea to you, Dave. And this is first time. Yeah, I thought about this the other day, and then I thought of you. I'm like, he would be the perfect person to do this. You know how we have, like, Baseball HQ has the Mayberry method, right? Where they, on a 1 to 5 scale, they kind of just quantify a player's skill, like like skill buckets, basically. Like if they have a lot of power, then there are 5 in that category, and if they don't have speed, there are 1. And they just have this simple formula, just on a 1 to 5 scale.
Yeah.
I feel like we need something like that just for risk, and not just injury risk, but just that quantifies, I think, the 3 main things: injury risk, playing time risk, and skills risk.
Yes.
And like I feel like obviously it's subjective, right? Like there is no data that we could really point to that can say, oh well, this person's definitely a 2 in the risk. It is a very subjective exercise, but I do think like having something like that, I kind of started to do it just for myself, for my own reference. I think that could be really helpful because you could, just have a number like say, all right, Jazz Chisholm is a 4, and I don't want that total number of risks that I take on to be too high. So if I'm taking Jazz Chisholm, who's a 4, I better make sure I have some 1s and 2s following.
Right.
So that's my idea to you.
It's great.
Go give everybody a 1 to 5 on a risk scale, package it, sell it. I think I really think people would be interested in something like that.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I've had similar thoughts before, and I don't know if you saw this, but when I was first kind of coming onto the scene, I went on Bubba's podcast. It was the first time I ever did a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he found me was I had put out a closer kind of sort of like what you're describing. Basically, I listed all the different risks, and then I ordered the closers by, skills risk. And I mean, literally that's all in there. I only did it for closers. I never did it for other positions, but it's pretty much exactly what you described. And that's still how I evaluate closers, because I'm looking, and each risk is on a different scale for me. So like job security is the most important. Injury risk is also very important. And then, skills risk is important, but less important for closers than it is with other positions, because it's weird. Like managers get in their head that like these guys are closers, and for whatever reason they get a longer leash. Like Kenley Jansen, he can suck several outings and still hold on to his job because he's got that closer label on him. So it's stuff like that where I'm always trying to figure out, okay, where can I find an edge? And we've done pretty well drafting some later closers. Like we had a lot of Estevez last year because he's not anything special in the skills category, but he's kind of got that closer tag, and the job security was high there. So I love that idea to apply to
take the top 300 players, for example, and just assign them a number. I think that could be
I mean,
helpful.
I don't want to toot my own horn, but I am kind of working on something like that with
really. You didn't tell me about this. What the heck?
Just injury history with risk. Top 25 at each position, 50 at outfield, and about 50 at pitcher. So beautiful. Can't wait to see that. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to bring you in, Dave, because you're the injury guy, right? You follow the injuries probably as closely as anybody in the industry. So I thought it'd be cool to have you and Dave together and to get both of your opinions, because again, this is a very subjective thing that we're doing when we're assessing risk. So I'd love to hear from the two of you and to kind of contrast and compare where you're at on some players that they are pretty volatile. And I try to pick guys that like, I don't want to pick Byron Buxton and Mike Trout because we know they're like off the charts risky, right? It's debatable whether they're still worthy of being drafted given their price. But I chose 6 players here that maybe you might have different opinions on. And we're going to use that 1 to 5 scale, right? With 1 being the least risky, 5 being the most risky. I'm going to start with Garrett Crochet, who right now has moved into the second round, especially after the trade to Boston. He's getting a lot of helium in drafts so far. So I'm going to start with you, Dave Funnel. Where would you put Garrett Crochet on a 1 to 5 scale of risk this season?
Right now, I would probably put him about, so 5 is highest, a high risk. Is that what we're saying? Mm-hmm. So I'd put him at about a 4 right now. He's been I was really surprised that he actually made the big jump that he did last year up to what was it, like 130 some innings. I thought the White Sox handled it perfectly. I thought they did a great job of stretching him out, limiting him down the stretch, small doses, but it was something that was done purposely because I think they were worried that if he continued to pitch, the value in the offseason wouldn't be what it was. So he's been injured his entire life, and I think something like that might happen again. He's going to be, for me, like the fool me one. He's the exception to like fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me again, that's fine. If I see it this year, then maybe I'll be in on it next year, but I need to see it again. So I'm pretty much out at his cost.
Okay, Dave McDonald.
Yeah, and pretty much if you're going in the first 3 or 4 rounds and you have even a 3 risk for me, I'm not taking you. So I have him, I had him pretty much between like a 3.5 and a 4. I don't know if that's too exact. Sorry, but like I was kind of going back and forth between them because like technically he is healthy right now, but like Dave said, he's also never stayed healthy. But the bigger thing for me is that he throws 97.3 miles an hour, and he just everybody on my friends called it the death list. It's like everybody who throws like 97 plus. You look like I had a list of guys that I was avoiding last year coming like who threw that. I remember what I think it was 97 or 97.5. But everybody I had on that list got injured last year. Like the last holdout was Hunter Green, who finally got injured in September, and it was just like I don't think that people are meant to throw that hard. And looking into it further, when I was on with James Anderson, I found out that actually 96.3 miles an hour, for whatever reason, I know it sounds super like random that that's what it is, but guys who throw that hard, the results are terrible the following year. So I just think that Garrett Crochet going as early as he is, there's way too many things that can go wrong there where I don't want to take him. I'm not taking any starters in the first 3 rounds. I'll be honest with you right now, but yeah, it's going to be too high for me.
Got it. All right, Grayson Rodriguez, Dave Funnel, 1 to 5 scale. Where are you at?
Well, I initially had him at like a 2 or a 3, but then I was listening to Dave actually with the James Anderson, and he brought it up, and I remember talking to both you, Chris, and Mike about how wow, I was in on him, but then listening to Dave, he was out. So he convinced me, and I did some more digging, and that I completely forgot he had a grade 2 lat issue in 2022 and missed some of that season.
Mm-hmm.
So he had that shoulder inflammation. He didn't return to the playoffs, and I think that was more of them waiting for next year. They didn't want to hurt him long term, or maybe it's because we don't know. I don't even know what the Orioles are doing these days. But yeah, I have him bumped up now. I have him around. I'm gonna say 3.5. I'll be exact, just like before. I'll say a 3.5. I might do him as my SP2, but I would need someone right after covering myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have him at a 4. He missed time with the shoulder. Like you said, he did have a lat injury in 2022, and then that came up again last year. He missed time with the shoulder. And then so sometimes with shoulder and lat, they're not always specific. I don't know if this is the same injury or a different one. But then in August, he missed time again with the lat injury, which ended his season, and they said he'll be ready for spring training. I don't think there's nearly enough talk about how much of a risk Grayson Rodriguez is. So
I agree.
I will not be drafting him anywhere. He's a 4 for me, and he also he's a hard thrower. He's the guy who threw 97, and I think that led to those injuries last year. And even last year, even though the velo was down, it was still at 96.3, which is right at that threshold. So for me, he's a guy I won't be drafting anywhere.
Okay, Mike, I just want to bring you in quickly. Any major disagreements, any different thoughts in terms of those 2 players?
No, I think that's I've never been a Grayson Rodriguez fan anyway, and obviously I love Crochet being a White Sox fan, but I think that there's a lot of risk there in terms of where he's at. I have nothing to say to disagree with either one of our esteemed panelists.
Let's go to another White Sox while you're here with us, and I want to get your take on Luis Robert. There's definitely, I don't know what Steamer was thinking. They had him projected for like 600 something plate appearances. Like, come on, like what are we doing here? That didn't make any sense. So, Mike, let me hear from you. Actually, Luis Robert, 1 through 5. Where are you putting him at on the risk scale?
The guy's played 140 games one time in his career. He's just not going to be there. And what'll probably happen is he'll go to somebody else's team and he'll play 150 games and hit 45 home runs and steal 30 bases, and I'll look like a fool. But the reality of it is that he just doesn't play dinged up, and it's really hard for him to be able to be productive when he's not feeling 100%. I just don't see, as a guy gets older, I don't see that risk going down. I don't see that saying, oh, he's 28, now he's going to be healthy. I just don't see it.
All right. Dave Funnel, 30 seconds. Your assigned risk and quickly a reason why you gave him that for Luis Robert.
I'll do a 4 only because it's not a 5 because at pick 85 it's the cheapest he'll ever be, but it's a 4 because he hasn't played that often. Even when he hasn't done what we expect him to do, and I'll take Brian Reynolds just a little bit later.
Got it. Dave McDonald.
Yeah, he's a guy who history of lower body injuries. He was always a fade for me at the 3rd to 4th round draft cost, but now that he's in the 6th to 7th round, I'll be honest with you, I'm definitely in. So I have him at a 3. He's coming in healthy. I don't think he'll stay healthy, but nothing that's like that 6th to 7th round. That's the point where I'm looking to find a guy who, let's say he stays healthy next year. That could be a guy who's the 30-30 guy. That's a guy who could be a top 2 round value. So I know he's on a bad team, but that's the kind of shots I'm looking to take.
Got it. All right. Another position player you mentioned earlier was Jazz Chisholm. How you were saying that you probably won't be in on him because he's coming off a year. He was finally healthy for the most part. Dave McDonald, again, 30 seconds. Where do you have Jazz and why?
I have him rated a 3. He's a guy who has a long history of hamstring injuries, particularly, but all sorts of lower body injuries. He plays super hard, so he gets injured a lot. And I don't see him changing the way he plays. He kind of plays with his hair on fire. He's in New York now. There's a lot of things going for him. But again, you're taking him hoping he stays healthy, and that's not the kind of risk I want to take. So at his ADP, I consider him a 4 risk, but overall a 3, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. The other thing with Jazz, like he's not a big guy, like you look at him, like he's skinny, like wiry, and he's not that tall. So I don't know. I mean, maybe this is just me talking out my butt, but like it might, to me, that matters, in terms of a player being able to play a full season of baseball, all right, Dave Funnel, where are you at on Jazz?
Well, he posted on Twitter with me. He replied to me that he'll stop running into walls. So
I saw that, Jazz. Yeah, he's a reply guy. He didn't like that tweet.
Now.
And Dave, do we trust athletes when they say things like that?
Never.
They've never lied. Never. No, I'm about a 4. He's frustrating to own most of the time, and I still don't know what's going on with that elbow. I hope it's nothing, but at pick 26, I'm out. Give me Austin Riley a little later.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One last position player, then we're going to move on. But and I put this one on there because I don't think many people are really consider him a big risk. But even though I've taken some shares of this player, I do feel a little uneasy about it, and that's Tommy Edman. The reason is I'd probably put him at like a 3.5. And I know he's healthy now. He finished, he was NLCS MVP. He finished the season strong. But, man, I don't like wrist injuries for hitters. Mm-hmm. And his wrist injury, if you remember last year, I mean, he missed almost the entire season. I think he came back in August because he kept having setbacks with that. And, again, this is kind of anecdotal, but it seems, I think of like Alex Kirilloff, and these guys that have recurring wrist issues. And how that could really, just destroy a career. I don't know if that's the case with Edman, but I am a little tentative because of that issue. Dave McDonald, what do you think about him?
Yeah, I always, hitters who are coming off shoulder or wrist surgeries the following year, like the year after that they get that surgery, I avoid them. So I had no Edman last year. But this year, because we're 15 months removed now from his wrist surgery, which was last October, I think he should be good to go. And the good thing for him is he's not a power hitter. So, you're not going to lose, even if he loses a little bit of power, which I think should be okay by now. But it's not like I'm drafting him for his power. So I think for what he does, I actually like Edman, especially if you can get him at a discount. So I only had him at like a 1.5 risk. So I'm in on him.
Okay. Dave?
Yeah, I have him at a 1. He had the surgery for it, and I know he had the setbacks, but he did come back and he looked pretty good in the process. And next year too, he's going to be hitting maybe 8th or 9th, and he's going to be driven in by Ohtani. So the runs will be up there as well. So for me, I'm in, and yeah.
That's a really man. I feel better now. Thank you guys. I think you made a good point, Dave McDonald, about he's not a power hitter, right? So like the wrist is not, obviously you still need to be a good hitter, but the wrist probably wouldn't affect that as much as say a pure power guy. So that's a really good point. And I'm feeling much better about my Tommy Edman shares. Mike, I'm feeling better about my Vinny Pasquantino shares. This is going really well. This is going really well for me.
When I miss on Vinny P, I wasn't here for that part of the show.
We spoke with the beat writer for the Royals, and he predicted that Vinny P was going to lead the American League in RBI, and he was going to go over 26 home runs this year. So
wow, in that part, that's tough to do.
Yeah, so I'm liking that because I got a lot of Vinny P already. All right, we are going to transition to bullpens as we normally do because we've got, I think, the best guy that breaks down bullpens in the industry, our very own Mike Carter.
Mr. Doctor.
Yeah, that's right. We got 2 doctors in the building today.
Oh boy.
But you put out your first big closer article of the off season over at Fantrax, Mike, and I just wanted to look at a few things within that article. And the first thing that really stood out to me when going through it was you like Jeff Hoffman.
I do.
You had Hoffman in your second tier of closers, which was 12th overall. And it stuck out to me that you had him ahead of closers that are going pretty high in ADP so far. Like Robert Suarez is a 6th round pick. Ryan Walker is making his way into the 6th round. So take me through that thought process in terms of ranking Hoffman that highly and ahead of those names I mentioned.
To be fair, I had done those rankings before the news came out that the Orioles and the Braves had both declined contracts with him based on what they saw with this shoulder situation, allegedly. Now, here's what I'm going to say, and you can take it or leave it. Both teams tried to negotiate with him after they said they were backing away from that deal, but both teams were looking at him as a starter. I left it the way that it was because I think of those 3 guys, he has the clearest path to getting you the most amount of saves. Granted, there is risk, and we've been talking about risk all night tonight. There's risk there because we don't know exactly what the state of that shoulder is. We know that he's had some issues before. The thing about Suarez that I don't like is really 2 things. I see a pathway to the Padres trading him at some point and him going to a team where maybe he's not closing. We don't know that. It's hard to know what that would look like. He's also not a real big strikeout volume guy, and so I feel like the risk with him to have an exploding ERA and ratios that hurt you and not give you a lot of strikeouts while giving you 25 saves might end up hurting you in some ways, especially at a really high ADP. Walker's a guy that I really like. I think he's a wonderful pitcher, but I don't know what his role is. He's got great skills. He had 10 wins last year. He had 10 saves last year. Buster Posey has said repeatedly that they are not trading Camilo Doval. As long as Camilo Doval is lurking there, I always think he's going to have a shot at coming back in that closer role. And Walker is a guy that really can do a number of different things. He even started a game last year for San Francisco. So I think he's the type of guy that could settle into a 2-inning type of role and be a stopper while not necessarily getting you saves. So when I weighed those 3 things out, what it came down to for me was I thought Hoffman had the best chance at getting pure saves. And I think that this is a guy that's got electric stuff. I was a little bit perturbed as a bullpen guy with how Philadelphia used him. He's got a clear opportunity with Yimi Garcia and Chad Green really being the only competition in Toronto, and everyone knowing that those guys are better served in setup roles. I thought Hoffman had the best chance. And so I left that there full well knowing that people would bring that up and discuss it and perhaps even criticize it. I think that that's a very fair criticism, but I think he's got a really good chance of getting 30 saves if he stays healthy. Now that's a huge if. To me, of those three guys, he had the clearest opportunity when I looked at it to get me the saves that I'm looking for. Now, do I think that he would be a guy that I would feel comfortable taking as my number one closer? Not at this point. No.
Yeah.
And I know Dave posted about that earlier today, and I fully agreed with that and sent that, retweeted that tweet, I guess is the term that they use, and put that back out into the universe. But I just don't, as a number two guy, I would eat up on that, as my kids would say.
All right, love it.
Oh, Jack's laughing behind me. He just heard me. He just heard me say "eat up," and he's laughing.
Eat it up. Oh, you spend too much time around, the baseball team, right? I'm sure, you're picking up their lingo.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there he is. There's Jack.
Yeah, he's back there. He's still nursing himself back to health. He's had pneumonia for 2 weeks.
When is Jack going to start joining us at the Glarf drafts?
That's a very good question, Dr. Dave.
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe this year. We'll see.
Yeah, I wanted to throw this to Dave and to both Daves here very quickly. Jeff Hoffman is, knowing what you know with these new reports that he failed his physical with both the Orioles and the Braves as a starting pitcher, though, or that's what they were looking at him as Mike mentioned. Are you drafting him this year? Is that enough for you to say you're not interested at what will likely be a top 100, definitely will be a top 100 pick?
As it stands right now, I might draft him given his price. Like, his ADP still hasn't risen to where it was. He has been healthy for the last couple years. So as it is right now, if I can get him as my RP, I want to say RP 2 or 3, I would do it, but it's just going to keep rising. And it is kind of scary that 2 teams flagged him. I know they still wanted to sign him, but it is kind of scary. So if it can stay pretty cheap, I'm in. But as it rises up, I'm probably going to pass. Okay.
Dave McDonald?
Yeah, it's just I I can't take him as a closer one, like I was saying on Twitter. If you take him as a closer too, I get it, as long as you can maybe pair him up with someone else that you like as a potential closer in there too. Like that would be a situation where you're willing to take 3 guys where you have a closer 3 that you also feel decent about. I can't do it as my closer 1. I get what you guys are saying, and I mean, Mason Miller was a guy last year who I was convinced was going to get hurt, and he didn't. Well, he did get hurt, but not. It was because he punched something, not because he, his arm gave out, which I thought was going to happen. So it is possible that because you're taking on less innings that you're not going to get hurt, but I don't know. What's showing up on an MRI that you're going to feel 100% he's fine to close, but he just can't start? It's still there. There's still an underlying issue, unless this is a negotiation tactic, like my friend Eric Halterman brought up, which is a possibility. But unless I know that for sure, Jeff Hoffman coming out and telling me, vibes over MRIs, that doesn't really help me. I'm
not, that what he said? I'm taking him. He comes out with that, saying something like that. You're fine in my book.
He's like, well, I disagreed with the MRI, and I'm like, I don't know how you disagree with an MRI machine. It's not a person. It's a machine showing you what's inside your body. I don't know. So until
that's some alpha energy right there.
Until I get more information, I'm gonna pass.
Okay.
They're always so trustworthy.
You're not gonna be able to get him at a decent closer 2 rate is the problem.
No.
Pick he's going around 100 and something. I think I was looking like Zach Gallen was going after him. You know, like I'm not taking him over a guy like that. So, yeah, I just can't do it.
No, the whole closer thing is just such a mess. That's why we need Mike to help us
Oh yeah,
figure all that out, because everything is just littered with risk, whether it's, you know, risk in terms of the role, injury. There's just so much. So yeah, it's just kind of a mess right now. Anyway, let's transition to some Sean Burke talk. I never thought that like Sean Burke would be like a player that I'd even be thinking about at this point. You know, like Sean Burke is a guy, he's never been like, I kind of knew the name, right? I'd heard like a couple years ago, like he may get a shot with the White Sox, but at no point was I hearing like Sean Burke is going to be, you know, like you got to watch out for Sean Burke. He's, you know, a top pitching prospect. Nothing. I never heard anything about this guy. All of a sudden, I'm going through ADP, and, you know, I heard some people say nice things about him in the offseason. And I noticed the other day that Sean freaking Burke is going around pick 400. And that may sound late, but like I'm looking at it in the context of a draft champions, a draft and hold where we're picking 50 rounds, you know, 750 players. And yeah, that seems late, but if we're picking 750 players, like pick 400 is like barely, it's like just past the halfway point. So I'm like, that's interesting. Like, what is it about Sean Burke that is justifying him being that high? Like, I thought Sean Burke would be like, you know, one of those spec plays, like in 550, 600 range. So I posted on Twitter the other day. Sean Burke pitches for the Chicago White Sox.
He does. Right? He does pitch for the Chicago White Sox.
The worst team in baseball.
Maybe not.
And he is projected by Steamer to have a 4.59 ERA in a 1.40 whip. Horrid number. Like those are unusable numbers. Okay. And we could talk about projections and how accurate, but it is a data point, right? So those aren't good numbers. And so I tweeted, his NFBC ADP is 402 over the last 30 days. What are we doing, people? And man, there was people came at me. Right? Like there is a lot. I was blown away by the level of love for Sean Burke within the fantasy baseball community. So I had to bring this up on the pod today. I got to get, first of all, because Mike, you are our resident White Sox fan and sufferer. I need to get your thoughts. Like, are you excited about Sean Burke? What do you think about him?
I think it's format dependent, like you were saying. I mean, I think if you're in a league like what you were just talking about, where you're picking 750 guys, a price tag of 400 is way too high. But I will say this, as a White Sox fan and as someone who's followed this guy's career, this was a guy who was a third-round draft pick that they paid overslot for, that they had real high hopes for coming out of Maryland, and he's had up and down career because of health and injury. And when his velocity is good, he's generally very good. So when he came up to the White Sox last year, granted an extremely small sample size, can't really draw too many conclusions from that. But his average fastball velocity was 95.3, hit a 28.9% K rate. When he's been healthy in the minor leagues, he's been able to do that. The last couple of years when he's had health issues, he's really struggled to do that. This guy has got a four-seamer, a slider, and a curve. They're very high on him. He's going to probably get 130 innings, would be my guess. I think if he gets 130 innings, I think he can surpass those ERA and ratio numbers and also get you 130 strikeouts. Now, granted, where you're taking him for your league, I wouldn't do that. However, I think he's a guy to really know on the White Sox because I think he could really firmly establish himself as a number 3 starter that they give some runway to. As I was just on with Bubba talking about the White Sox the other night, the White Sox have a lot of young pitchers that they're going to have come in for 2 or 3 or 4 starts and then send them back. They're going to try to really manage these workloads this year. I don't see them doing that necessarily with Burke. I think he's going to have a fairly long runway because I think that they like him to be able to eat some of those innings along the lines of Davis Martin, but they think he's a better pitcher than Davis Martin. It's hard to say, but I think if he's healthy, he's an interesting guy that could end up paying some dividends for people. 7-8 wins, 130 innings, 130 strikeouts. Not going to get a lot of wins on the White Sox, obviously, but I think he can pitch a little bit.
Very, very well reasoned take there. I like it. Dave McDonald, you had jumped into that conversation that we were having on Twitter about Burke, and you had asked me who are some players that you would prefer over him in that range. So I mentioned a couple on there, and I'll mention them here, and I want to get your take on if you disagree with any of them. A few guys that I would take over Burke: Hayden Wesneski, Joey Cantillo, Edward Cabrera, and Andrew Heaney. Do you disagree with any of those? And if so, why?
So I like all of them to a degree, and it does kind of depend on what you're looking for. Like, let's take Andrew Heaney, for example. Obviously, this is a guy who is okay. So first of all of these guys, they're all, late picks that you're just hoping, like we were talking about on Twitter. I'm hoping to hit on someone that can be useful to me. None of these guys are, they all have severe flaws, skills, injuries. Most of them have high walk rates, like a lot of these guys are very similar types of players, right? So I'm looking for skills at this point in the draft. I'm looking for something like an elite pitch, multiple good off-speed pitches, a good fastball, good velocity. I'm looking for things that I can point to and say, okay, this guy could potentially take the next step and be, possibly usable at the least, maybe even good. So, my favorite in that group is Jorge Cantillo, and it's not because I'm a Guardians fan. It's because his Vulcan changeup is an elite pitch, and his slider is also fantastic. The problem is he only throws it under 9% of the time. So if he throws that more, because he's got a bad fastball. A lot of these guys have bad fastballs, but a lot of times what we see is when guys first come up, they throw their fastball like a lot, like over 50% sometimes, or at least close to 50%, and then they kind of wane back on that after in subsequent seasons. So I generally assume that guys are going to throw their fastballs less and less, and so I think that's why we see guys take a big step forward in their next seasons. And so the problem with Cantillo is I don't think he has a rotation spot. So Burke versus Cantillo, if you ask me right now, I'd take Burke because I'm pretty certain he has a rotation spot. I don't.
And you made Joey Cantillo Latino. You said Jorge.
Oh no! Oh, did I? Oh,
yeah, Joey Cantillo. Yeah.
Wait, what?
No,
Oh,
you had said Jorge Cantillo when you were talking earlier.
Yeah, and it always throws me because I want to say Cantillo, but I heard him pronounce it's Cantillo, so it kind of throws me for a loop. But yeah, Joey. Sorry.
Maybe you were thinking about Jorge Cantu, right? Remember him?
Oh yes,
that could be for a later segment.
I forgot about that guy, but no, he's my favorite guy on the list. But I just don't know if he has a spot. So I like Burke more than him. Wesneski, he's got an elite sweeper, but his fastball is awful. It just gets pummeled. And if you have a bad fastball, you can succeed. I mean, we've seen Corey Kluber, Shane Bieber, and Tanner Bybee, all Cleveland starters, bad fastball, but they have multiple really, really good off-speed pitches. Wesneski only has one. And I think that's where he's struggling. I don't see him taking that next step forward unless in Houston, maybe going to a new organization, maybe they can develop something. So I can see it with Wesneski, but I think that Burke has more of the skills that I'm looking for right now. Edward Cabrera was a guy I was very high on last year. Chronic shoulder issues, though, at this point. Also a high walk rate guy. I was very in last year, hoping he could just throw just a couple more strikes, but I saw no development. He was hurt for a lot of the year. I just don't. I mean, it's fine. I think it's a fine pick at that point in the draft. I'm just not super confident. And Heaney, I think Heaney's the best guy on this list in terms of what you're going to get. I mean, he might not stay healthy, but he's given you more innings the last couple of years, whereas before that he could not stay healthy at all. But
he's got to sign somewhere. That's my one issue right now is I'm getting a little nervous that he still hasn't signed.
Right, he hasn't signed, but also it's a limited ceiling. Like his upside is a mediocre starter. At this point in the draft, I'm looking to take a shot on a lotto pick potentially, and I think Burke, Wesneski, Cantillo, and even ECAB all have that upside that Heaney just doesn't have. So I think if you're looking for like, I need guaranteed innings at that point in the draft, which is probably not a good point to be at, then Heaney's your guy. Outside of that, I don't think he would be my pick in that group.
Okay. Dave Funnel, tell me why I'm right.
Well, I joined in that.
Don't do it, Dave. Don't do it, Dave.
I joined in that conversation too, and my biggest stance was, and I posted it there, was that he played for the White Sox, and it gives a little, like, I'm not trolling here, but it's such a small chance for a win, and he's already going to hurt you. He can't get a win. His whips are going to suck because he walks a lot, and he won't get saved. So you're working with two categories here, with the hope that batters catch up to him with his pitches. I mean, you've got two potential categories, and that's it. So that was my stance as to why, I would have been out on him and, tried other pitchers later. But then digging deeper too, and I know, Mike, you talked about it. He's had some shoulder soreness, and he was on the 60-day IL for that last year as well. He started the season on the IL with a recurring shoulder injury. So I know we're talking about pick 400 here, so it's an easy drop if you do it, but maybe to save you a drop right there.
I'm just going to chime in real quick here. So, and obviously small sample size here, but, I'm not looking, we kind of talked about the win stat. The wins category in general is the least bankable thing in fantasy baseball. It doesn't matter. I was talking about Aaron Nola, like very similar seasons the last 4 years, very different win outputs. Like it's so variable. But like we look at Edward Cabrera in 20 starts, he had 4 wins. Andrew Heaney, 31 starts, 5 wins. Hayden Wesneski, last 2 years combined 6 wins. Joey Cantillo, 2 wins or 3, I think it was. And Sean Burke had 2 wins and 3 starts. So like, I'm not saying that means anything, but I'm saying I don't think we should really be comparing like who's got a good chance at wins. I think you can kind of get in trouble. Like, I think at this point in the draft, you're just trying to invest in skills. You're not, the rest of your rotation needs to be carrying the load for you in wins. These are just where you're trying to put guys in who can not kill your ratios and get you some strikeouts. And hey, if they happen to luck into a win, you're maybe starting them against a weak team at some point. That's kind of what you're looking to do. I'm more looking for useful with the potential for a breakout at this point in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jorge Cantu had no wins last year, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
Jorge Cantu, nothing.
I don't think in his career.
Wow. But I will tell you about the White Sox. One thing about Burke that I will add here too, though, is if he does prove valuable at getting strikeouts, the White Sox don't have any starting pitchers that strike anybody out. You got Cannon, you got Perez, you got Bryce Wilson if he makes the rotation. They don't have a lot of that there. So if he shows an ability to do that in spring, I think he could really end up being a guy that's a top pitcher for the White Sox. I know it's not saying much, but
I mean, he probably should be. I mean, you've got Martin Perez, Jonathan Cannon, Martin Davis, and Bryce Wilson. Like, I'm not taking any of those guys over Sean Burke. So,
yeah, he is the ace. He is the ace. And I think Dave Funnel, you're underestimating. You said he's not going to have a chance at wins on the White Sox. I think you're underestimating them a little bit. I mean, they did bring in Josh Rojas. Hello. They signed Omar Narvaez to a minor league deal. He could, be promoted and hit 180. So
they're gonna win 60 games, guys. They're gonna win 60.
They're absolutely terrible. But all good discussion. I think all good points. And can I tell you guys a secret?
If we say no, are you still gonna tell us?
Yes, he will.
Yeah, I'm still gonna tell you.
Yes, tell us a secret, Taurus.
I just drafted Sean Burke.
Oh, look at that!
I did it.
Look at that.
After the discussion, but you know what? I wanted to mention that because you had tweeted about this the other day, Dave, and I wanted to
Dave?
Kind of like incorporate that into this. You said do further research. You're talking about how to be a good fantasy baseball player, and you said do further research and challenge your view and see where you come out. So sometimes, I put stuff out there like I did with Sean Burke to just, I just felt like saying it, but also part of it is that I want to kind of see, I want to challenge my opinion, right? Because I think that's how I kind of fine tune my views on certain players. And listen, I didn't leave that discussion and this discussion we had today like, oh, I need Sean Burke everywhere. But I got enough good points and pushback on that tweet that I said, you know what? I probably should have a share or two of Sean Burke. You know, if I'm doing 10 teams, yeah, let me get a 1 or 2 shares of him, because there are things to like there, and there are people who really like him. So yeah, I think that's I said that jokingly, but I think that is an important point. Like you can't get that take lock, right? Like, oh, this player is bad, you know, and like not be open to new information. So so yeah, I am in the Sean Burke business, but
there's way too many people in the industry who they have a take and that's it. Like they don't want to discuss things. Like I'm on Twitter to talk about things. Like I'm very similar to you in that I want to put something out there and I want people to respond and tell me what they think, and especially if it's a dissenting opinion, because then I might learn something. And I think everybody should be open to learning things at all times, because it does not matter in the slightest whether you get it wrong initially. It only matters if you get it right in the end. Like I'll throw out takes, someone will come back at me something, and I'll think about it, and I'll go, you know what, I agree with that, and then I'll switch my mind. And I think people think that that's like weakness, and it's not. It's weakness to be stubborn.
I think this is true. This is a life lesson, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
just having this
outside
kind
of fancy baseball in all aspects of life. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And let me tell you too, the last thing on this, like part of why I took Burke as well is I can't lose, right? Because now people know me as the anti-Sean Burke guy. So if he walks, you know, the ballpark and is in the minors in May, then I look like a genius, right? But if I'm wrong and he goes off and he becomes this ace that people are envisioning, I get all the money because I have Sean Burke on my team. So I'm in a position where I can't lose. That, my friends, is how you hedge a bet.
Hold on. Did you reach for him?
No, I took him. Well, I took him like around past ADP. And that's like a scenario like where in a situation like that, I have my doubts, but you know what? At the right price, I'll take a shot. Kind of like what I told you with that draft where I took O'Neal Cruz in the 4th. He fell like 10 picks past ADP, and I was like, all right, you know, this will be my O'Neal Cruz team. But anyway, we got to get moving. We got one last segment for you before we get out of here, and this is our mental health minute, which if you're listening for the first time, this is where we talk some non-baseball stuff. And each of us, including our guests, give one thing that we're currently doing to maintain our physical and or emotional wellness. So today I think we are going to have to actually keep it to a minute. We usually don't, but if everybody could just give me a minute, what they're doing to maintain their wellness. But there's one other thing I wanted to add to it this week. I saw a tweet that I really liked, and we're going to incorporate this. The tweet said, this is from @DeferredWalkOn. Men will literally sit around and name random sports players for 2 hours instead of going to therapy. And listen, I'm a therapist. I obviously value therapy and think if people need support, it's a great thing. But I also think that sitting around and naming random sports players can be very therapeutic. So this is what we're going to do. As part of our mental health minute, you're going to tell me what you're doing to maintain your wellness. And you're also going, you don't have to talk about them, but just name one random, hopefully very obscure baseball player. I'm going to go to our guest first, Dave McDonald.
No, damn it. Yeah, I'm probably not doing enough to maintain my physical and mental well-being. I was a psychology major. I for a long time thought about going to grad school to be a therapist as well. So it's definitely something I believe in very much. There's a lot of people that I talk to who, Govier, another close friend of mine who's a therapist and who, always talks about mental health. And it is very important. I think for me, I talk to my friends a lot and I'm very open about pretty much everything. And I think that's probably the one thing that I am doing right. There's a lot of other things I should be doing though. But yeah, I'll say that my friends having a really good circle of people, both in person and you guys and people on the internet who I know, but don't unfortunately get to spend as much time in person with. But my random player is going to be former Twin, mediocre at best, Boof Bonser.
Boof
Bonser.
That's a nice one. I
Name.
love it. I already like that helps me emotionally when I just hear Boof Bonser. Like,
Right?
how do you not smile?
Uplifting.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for sharing, Dave. Yeah, I know you got your boys. You got the consortium, right? You have a great group around you. All seem like good dudes.
I never see those jerks though either. I luckily
they live by you, don't you? They live in.
I have so Jake lives near me, but I can't even get that dude to do our podcast together. What do you think the chances are that I can get him to hang out in person? So Tony lives in Cincinnati, so he's like 3 hours from me. I have a lot of other friends that I hang out with and everything that I don't talk about because it's not relevant to the fantasy baseball space. Right. But yeah, I have a lot of other friends that I hang out with in person. Those jumps, not so much.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I mean, that is a blessing. Not everybody, especially today's, it's
something I've realized.
Make friends, I feel like, even though we're more connected,
right.
It seems hard. So that if you have a good friend group, that is super, super valuable and something to be grateful for. All right, Mike, what do you got?
Well, I've been trying to do more things at the end of the night to allow myself to wind down and actually get some sleep. And school has been hectic, and it's been a busy time. Jack's been really sick the last couple of weeks, but he's on the rebound now, which is good news. And I've been just I love to read. I love to read novels. I like to read fiction. And so what I've been doing is at the end of the night, I put the fantasy baseball prep down for a little while, and I try to read from one of my novels for about a half an hour. I got a couple of different ones there. I have a tendency to bounce around a little bit, but I've been doing that as a way to kind of help me get myself squared away after really long days where I've had a lot of really busy stuff going on. I've had a number of 12, 14-hour days in a row here the last couple of weeks. So it's been kind of busy. My random player, boy, oh boy, this is a fun one. I went back and asked my dad and my brother and my sister about guys that I used to like and see what they came up with. I had a thing for old catchers because I was a catcher for a long time. And so guys like Bob Boone and Terry Kennedy and guys like that came up. But my all-time favorite player when I was a kid as a scrub middle infielder was this shortstop named Scott Fletcher. Probably before a lot of your guys' time. He played for the White Sox and the Rangers and the Cubs. I loved him. I don't know why exactly. It's sort of an irrational thing, but that was my random player for tonight.
Awesome. Good stuff. Dave Funnel.
Yeah, for me, I'm trying to keep things light because I got a couple family members who aren't doing so well right now, but they're on the mend. But what I like to do is I just like to sit around and talk sports. I talk with while I'm online, but I talk with my son, and even over the break, my brother-in-law from South Korea came over, and we would just every sports topic we would talk about. And I just remember back in the day, we started bonding over baseball because we would look at old players on Baseball Reference, and the random player I'm bringing up here is old Hoss Radburn.
Oh my, yes.
Wow. What year did he play?
He was before even your time, Mike.
Oh. Yes, he was.
No, it's impossible. Mike has been around since they invented baseball. You don't know that. People don't know that.
Back in the 1880s, we would look at
he threw a lot of innings.
This is what we would do. The guy pitched 678 innings and started 73 games in a season, and we would just look at this and howl. So, yeah, it just thinking about random players. This is the one that brought us together, and yeah.
I think you got a new nickname, Dave.
Yeah, Old Hoss.
Old Hoss. Drinking that Tim Hortons coffee, baby.
Yeah.
Get after it.
The Old Hoss. Man, yeah, some of the names are just like incredible. Like when you go through, like the 18 players from the 1800s, like the nicknames they gave them. We've lost our way with that. We need to come up with some better nicknames for the current generation.
Yeah.
But all right.
Some of those old nicknames wouldn't really fly by today.
that is true. Yes, that is true. Many of them are not.
Ken Boyd, maybe though. You know,
what's that one?
Maybe like another oil can Boyd type.
Right,
name.
right.
Oh,
Yeah, that one is still kosher today. But you're right. A lot of them would not fly. All right. So my mental health minute, simple. Go do something to help somebody else. Contribute to other people in some way. Oftentimes when we are like, stressed or we're down or we're struggling, and we get stuck in our own head. And one of the ways in which you can get out of your own head and get out of that rut that you may be in is to go out there and do something for somebody else. It could be a small thing, right? It could be giving a compliment to the person behind the counter. It could be, just helping with somebody with something very small, maybe around the house or whatever. There's so many opportunities, endless opportunities to do that. And, especially now with what we have going on in California, that presents opportunities to help people. There are websites out there. There's lots of stuff, and you have to be a little careful, right? Because there's people that are probably going to take advantage of that. But there's websites of called like Charity Navigator, I know, is one that could kind of help you vet the legitimacy of some of these charities that are being set up in the wake of the wildfires. So I encourage people to just think about that, especially if like you're just stuck in your own stuff. Try to give back in some way. So that is my advice for this week. In my random baseball player, Luis Polonia. You remember Luis Polonia?
I do.
That does sound familiar. I couldn't tell you anything about him, but
he played from 1987 to 2000. He was on the 94 Yankees, that's right when I started really watching baseball. So that's why he sticks out to me. I remember Danny Tartabull was on that team. Like those guys, they like, I don't know. That's like right when I started to really follow it. So they stand out. Interesting.
Yeah, he played left field and was a leadoff guy.
Yep. He played full seasons. 1992, he had 635 plate appearances, 0 home runs. 1993, 1 home run. So he had 2 home runs in the span of like 1,500 plate appearances. And then randomly, 1999, the year of Brady Anderson, where all of a sudden he turned into a power hitter. Everybody was doing the roids. Apparently, Luis Polonia decided to partake. He hit 10 home runs. 10 home runs in 1999, where like every year before that, he had 1 or 2. So what a time that was. But that is my guy. I don't know what it is. It is very therapeutic to just hear some of these names, especially the old hoss. But we are going to leave it there. Dave, we appreciate you coming on. Anything that you want to plug, where people could find you, anything like that you want to share?
I wish I had something to plug. I've got 2 co-hosts who are not co-hosting right now. So
get them moving.
Yeah. You want to help me on this? I don't know what else I can do, man. Jake and Justin have both assured me that we will be doing High Stakes Heat and Friends with Fantasy Benefits coming up soon. Well, actually, you should have already been doing it, but if you want to see me, you can find my stuff, on Twitter at RunDMCD. Make sure you add that D. Although it's always funny when I get people tagging me for Run DMC stuff, telling me that I inspired them with my music. So always love that.
Must feel good. Yeah, it must feel really good.
Yeah. I wish I had their bank accounts, but
yeah.
I've been on a bunch of pods so far this offseason. Just was on with James Anderson, Rob DiPietro on Deadpool Hitter, and James Anderson was RotoWire, and then with you guys today, and just trying to get ready for Glarv here coming up, because that's the last 2 years I have not been ready in time, and my results have shown it. So this year, getting back into it, gonna get back to dominating again, hopefully. and helping Glarf stay on top. Really excited for that. We got our draft coming up in about a month with Mike there with me, and we just added our friend Lauren Auerbach. So very, very excited for that.
Nice.
Awesome. Good stuff, man. Go crush it. Go crush Mike. I'll hear
Nope.
all about it.
Ain't happening. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Torres.
no, Mike is I really do see a new Mike.
Seriously,
Mike is focused.
100%. Like from when I met Mike to now, completely different person in terms of his attitude towards playing. Like I love this competitiveness from him. He took the time, he learned, he got so much more confident, and I love to see that. I would love it if Mike won. Honestly, I would not hate on that at all.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens there. But guys, I said an hour and a half. It didn't happen. I'm so sorry. But we are gonna leave the show there for today. Next episode will be in 2 weeks. We're gonna be interviewing New York Daily News Yankees beat writer Gary Phillips. So stay tuned for that. Again, follow us on Twitter, leave a rating and review. We would appreciate it. But until next time, we'll see you. Thank you so much for listening to the Fantasy Baseball Beat.